Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I am the Senior Editorial Director of Brand Insider at MediaPost, and this is Brand Insider BTS, where I get to pull back the curtain on some of the most influential women marketers today. And with me is Deepika Cattry. She is the Associate Director of HCP Marketing and Immunology at Bristol Myers Squibb. Hey, Deepika.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. It's a Friday, so I'm excited for the weekend.
I am too, and although it would be nice to be back in Florida when we were in Bonita Springs there for the Farmer Summit, but that was when we first met, and now we got to talk a lot then, but now I get to really find out about Topeka.
Yeah, no,
So
it was a great event. I was so glad MediaPost can have me there, and I learned so much. So I'm just excited to dive deeper.
yeah, no, I am too. So, as I always say, I just love to get to know you guys. Like, I started to get to know many of you women at these events, and I just realized how incredible a lot of your careers are in your lives. And so, this way, it's a great way for me to share it with everyone else. So, getting right into it, I usually like to sort of maybe associate with your company, but in no way we're not going into your brand. I always have to remind people, I don't want to hear about your brand. I want to hear about you. But I do, the slogan for Bristol Myers Squibbs is its vision is to transform patients' lives. I want to read this through science, and the logo, oh, and your logo is a hand representing the personal touch that you bring to your work and inspiration you draw from patients and people. So I love to sort of pull from that, which that's a great motto, and I love
Mhm.
that. But I want to put it to you. So what or who has really inspired you the most in your career? And how did they transform you, if in fact it did?
Yeah, so for me, this is a great point to look back and reflect on all of kind of how it began about like maybe a little bit over 10 years ago. So for me, I would say career-wise, I've had very two influential men that I worked with when I was at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Two physicians, Dr. Alexander Lasokin and Dr. Jed Walchuk. When I was working with them at a cancer hospital, both were oncologists, they took a chance and hired me as a research study assistant. I had very little research experience. I had a lot of science experience, but I had a lot of passion. I had a lot of excitement and I had a lot of hope. And both of those two physicians, along with their research staff, took a chance on me. And little did I know I was working on pivotal phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials, which led to the approval of two really big drugs, Opdivo, Yervoy, and actually another third, Keytruda, which ended up changing the landscape of how people really treat oncology. And little did I know that working on a trial at that time that would be able to impact so many patients and their lives years ago really was phenomenal. And I'm so thankful that they were able to take me under their wing. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be in the role where I am today, transcending academia, being in the pharmaceutical industry. So I really am thankful for them just really taking me under their wing.
Well, yeah, and so it sounds like it took, because you said you were doing research. So it sounds like it took you to into another direction, or at least deeper into what you were doing. And then, of course, in the marketing side of things. So was there sort of that aha moment as you're doing it, or did it evolve that way? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so actually, I wanted to go to med school. That's why I did research. I said, I'll just do this job for 2 years in a hospital. I'll apply to med school. And then from there, I'll just become a physician. Well, then I actually realized I also had a business undergrad. So I was a business minor and a science major. And my father's an entrepreneur. So there's a little bit of that business element that kind of was in me or is in me. And one of the physicians, like, Deepika, you don't need to go to med school. If it's not broken, don't fix it. And that's where he really had to just, why don't you look into a career where combining science and business and research, which is the pharmaceutical industry. So at the time when I was working at Sloan Kettering, I was working with a lot of the global pharmaceutical companies there. And I just asked, hey, is this an opportunity or a role I could have in the future? And it really was a great opportunity where I could bridge all three. And that's where it was a spark for me to say, you know what? I think I can make a difference not only locally in my community in New York City at the time, but also globally across the world.
No, I think that's awesome. And I want to get more into your career as we move forward, but I do want to sort of back it up. Same question, but personally. So has there been someone who was really an inspiration to you on a personal level and away from the career? Let's take it away because obviously that was still personal, but
Yeah.
just about your career. But and how did that transform you as you moved along through life?
Yeah, so I would have to say my parents, like they basically are a sense of inspiration. Both of them immigrated here from India to America with very little. They came here, started a business, started a family, and they really had values of hard work, of strength, but also grace and compassion. So for them, they really wanted to see how they can build a better legacy, not only for themselves, but for their family. And I'm part of that legacy with myself and my two siblings. And I'm just so grateful that they basically shared with me, you have to work hard. And you also need to have an education because you can only go so far with certain things, but you also have to stand your ground. People will take advantage of you. So how do you do that? But with grace. So those are some of the values that they've instilled in me. And I still, look up to them every day. They're just amazing human beings.
Well, I think that's wonderful that you got that so early on from your parents and you still have that relationship. I'm just curious though, because sometimes, especially when you have parents like yourselves who worked so hard to get to the United States and to make a life for you and your siblings, and does it put a little bit extra pressure on you maybe, or do you, just because you don't want to let them down, or how do you really deal with that? I mean, we all have pressures from our parents, obviously. I know I completely have, but I'm just curious if there was any of that going into what you're doing and even some of the decisions you made.
Yeah, I think you hear elder immigrant daughter syndrome, where you hear online, it's a real thing, where basically you are put in a position where you have to learn two languages, where your family may only have one. You have to navigate the Western world along with also embracing your traditions. And you have to kind of be the first one to do a lot of things. Like in my family, I was the first one to go to college, first one to graduate college, to work in a corporate setting, to have multiple master's degrees. So it is pressure, but I think as I've gotten older now, there is an opportunity where you kind of have to ask for help and be able to delegate to other siblings. I've been doing that a lot more now as I've gotten older, but there is a sense of pressure, but you really have to also, not everyone is privileged where they're giving, your parents are pretty much putting 110% on you to make sure you're successful in life. And so I think it's a little bit of a give and take, but it takes a while to understand how do you navigate that.
Yeah, I mean, and understand, and also like as you find your own successes, and then I'm sure, because as you even said, you went from, research and then you evolved to where you are today, and these are decisions that you discover along the way yourself. So, your parents give you those
Yeah.
tools, but then you start to maybe make more decisions, not about trying to please them. And I'm not saying that that's where you were at, but I just feel like has that sort of evolved as you've gotten more successful and maybe more confident in yourself?
Yes, like for example, everyone who has parents who are South Asian say you have to go to med school. You have to be a doctor, you have to be an engineer, just because that's how society is perceived, just because they just don't know more about it. So I think for me, when I was navigating the challenge of saying, I'm not going to go to med school, instead I'm going to do a different path, get an MBA, stay in research, do clinical research, be a marketer, a lot of the questions like, what is that? But you know what? As I've gotten progressed in my career, they're really proud, and they actually tell others, maybe don't send your kid to med school, have them do pharma. So they've kind of come a long way, but there's a lot of education and transparency that you need to have along the journey because you can't just keep everything to yourself. Your parents have to be your friends at some point where you let them in and show kind of your vulnerabilities, but then also let them know like this is going to better you in the future.
Yeah, well, and we talked about it a little bit even when you were, say, graduating college, and I'm curious in terms of, I always like to see what you envisioned. I mean, it sounds like you had a certain path, but you started out in research and then you've crossed over, and did you, even with those kind of already, whether you want to be a doctor or whatever it may be, so pretty lofty ambitions, but did you see yourself to where you've become today? And I'm just curious of what you were seeing, what you thought of how your career would go and how it's become to where you are today.
Yeah, actually, no. I wanted to be like Dr. Bailey, who's on Grey's Anatomy. If anyone has seen it,
Yep.
where she's a little firecracker running around the hospital doing surgeries, and even like kind of like Sanjay Gupta, who's on TV as a medical doctor. So I thought I was going to be that. That's where I was like, I want to be on TV as a medical correspondent. And then the fact,
Fake. Drop whether on Grey's
exactly.
Anatomy or in real life.
Well, the real life Grey's Anatomy, I would say, is kind of what I wanted to be. But then for me, when I was in undergrad and then grad school, I'm not a great test taker. So for me, I didn't even think you could have a career where you combine science, business, and research. And no one in my family's been in corporate America. No one's had a corporate job. They're entrepreneurs, or my mom's a homemaker. So for me, it was a lot of just like not knowing what other careers are out there. And we also didn't have social media growing up, so you couldn't just go on TikTok and say, "What is the life of a marketer or a life of a physician?" So I think there was a lot of challenges you had to navigate on your own. But no, I would never think I would be here with you talking about how I transitioned from being a researcher to being marketing, living in Philadelphia and just kind of being able to travel the world. It goes back to, you should never stress over what you want to be. Things always happen best that they can.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because I mean, as they say, the best laid plans or whatnot. Like it's just you can have so many ideas of what you want your life to be when you're 18. And
Exactly.
it's just the more you try, then the more it evolves and things like you said, things that you wouldn't have envisioned for yourself at all, they don't, I'm not saying they just happen. I don't mean it by that anyways, like it just falls in your lap, but you find new discoveries of things you enjoy or are good at, and then you go from there.
Right. Yeah, it's all about the experiences. If you're just sitting with your head in a book, you're not going to look up and see what's around you to be, what might be your oyster, as they say.
Yes, I totally agree. All right, so now I want to ask you, and I want to see if maybe it's what I thought, but what do people get wrong about you when they first meet? So
Do you want to go first, Lisa? What do you think people think of me?
I'm going to say if I thought so, but I want to hear what do you think people get wrong about you? And then afterwards they might be like, "Oh, you're not at all."
So I come off very serious in the beginning and kind of stern, and people will say a little intimidating, but actually I like to laugh. I like to be a comedian sometimes, and I'm actually very caring. So if you win my trust professionally and personally, I joke and say I'm like a softie, but mostly in the beginning people will think I have a hard shell.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say I thought you had a hard shell, but I do agree with the serious. Even with
Mhm.
our our interactions on email through emails, and then when
Yeah.
we were first, well, even when if you remember when because we did those the quick take interviews, and all that's all about work, and so you were very in that work zone, and I
Yeah.
feel like shake it off, like come on, Deepika, and but then as we started to do other stuff and get to know each other, and then we did, some other we were talking about, and all of a sudden I saw that side of you loosening up, like you were joking around and you were relaxing. I was seeing you shine, I guess. And it's not
Oh,
that you're
thank you.
not professionally. I mean, like but that's just a different persona. And I then saw the more personal Deepika. So I
Yeah.
see that. Like I agree with what your thoughts were in terms of what.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit going back to like, with some of the pressures of growing up when you're in like an immigrant household, especially as the oldest daughter, that you have to kind of have that tough skin to navigate through life and just in general, like be kind of a shield for your family. And I think that kind of does go into personally, but it takes a while to, become your authentic self. So I'm glad you think I'm fun and I could tell a good joke, but I'm gonna say I don't do dad jokes.
Oh, I don't really want dad jokes anyway. But no, because I mean, I got to know you over the course of a few days. So, whereas if I had just maybe met you and we left, then I might still be like, yeah, you are kind of serious.
Yeah.
It does. So then like you don't know, because I'm, as you can see, not, but I do actually, I sort of watch, like if you were to meet me like in the way we met each other, I'm,
Right.
interviewing you, being host kind of thing. But I usually step back a bit. Like, so I'm not as, and I kind of watch the room or whatever. So I've gotten that as well, maybe for a different way, in the sense that, I don't know, maybe I'm snobby or something. Like maybe I
No, you're great, Lisa. You're very warm and welcoming and make sure everyone is at ease.
no. I'm not saying I think I am, but I'm saying I think people might assume that initially because you see me talking with someone a lot and then all of a sudden I'm quiet because I can be quiet when I don't know people. So anyway, enough about me. This is not my interview. Okay, so you talked about all the opportunities you've had professionally, and I know that as I always say, I do my snooping, and that you were a guest lecturer in I think it was last summer for gene therapy. Let me get this
Hmm.
right. So, the Cell and Gene Therapy Summer Academy at Drexel University, which
Hmm.
I think is amazing because obviously you're an inspiration to so many of these students, I'm sure. And you said you had these takeaways from when you on
Hmm.
the post, there were takeaways from what everyone was talking about. So I want to turn those takeaways, and those basically they were questions you were asking, and I want to ask them to you. Okay.
Okay.
All right. One you wrote is no question is naive. Embrace curiosity, especially when navigating the complexities of clinical trials. Okay, so not about clinical trials. This
Mhm.
isn't about clinical trials, but I'm curious when you were in college and you were the most curious, just like the students were that you were lecturing with, was there a question that you wished you asked?
Yeah, so I went to undergrad at Boston University and I was a human physiology major, business minor. But before I became the business minor, I was actually really curious because I would be coming out of like general chemistry lab, smelling like formaldehyde. And then I would see these glamorous students leaving the school of business. And I was like, oh, like what are they doing? Like I kind of want to be like those kids over there. So I did ask a question at the time to the advisor saying, how can I do a business minor? So that's why if I didn't ask that question, I probably would not be where I am today because of the fact that I no one guided me at the time to say, you know what, a business degree and a science degree is actually pretty advantageous later on if you want to navigate the healthcare pharma industry. But one question I wish I asked, which I regret, is how would I be able to have studied abroad? I have a lot of friends that went to London, went to Germany. And for me, I just thought I just couldn't do it because of my rigorous schedule, being a science major, a business minor, and doing research projects on the side. So I would say for those who are in early career, ask if you could go even work abroad if you have the opportunity. But for those who even are doing grad school or undergrad, I would definitely ask, how can I go abroad? Because that is so influential to expand your overall knowledge of how everyone else works outside of just your little bubble.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I wish I had done the same. Like it was just, I was so wrapped up in, I had my boyfriend and my friends and the school and whatever. And it was just like, I would have loved to, like the thought of leaving for a length of time, but I think that it would have been so much more of an advantage if
Mhm.
I would totally recommend that to anyone in college today. Okay, so my next question for you, or for you, your take was
Mhm.
value real world experience. While an advanced degree is impressive, which you kind of said early on, hands-on experience is invaluable. Take time to breathe and explore. So what I want to ask you, what has been your most rewarding real world experience? And not in work, but personally.
So I would say traveling, and it intersects several parts of my life, personally, professionally, and where I want to go. So for me, at a young age, I was very thankful where my parents wanted to explore the world. I get their curiosity from them. They're like going on vacation at least once a year, and they just actually would take all of the siblings and say, "Let's go." We went to Europe at a young age, went to India, we even went to New Zealand and Australia, and I think that personal curiosity translates into personally, yes, you want to be able to make sure you can afford it, but traveling is actually not that expensive if you budget it appropriately. So that's one thing I think is a caveat people don't do it. Second is it's so rewarding to learn about different cultures, the way different people think, because that will help you in the future if you're working for a global company where you have to work with people from all over the world. Now I get to have the opportunity to work from people from Spain, work from people from even Japan. And if it wasn't for me having being open-minded culturally, if I haven't gone to these places like Thailand or India, I wouldn't be able to understand how people think differently. Not everyone thinks fast-paced like we do in America. There's certain people that take time, that don't make a decision in a certain culture the right way, same day as we do. So I think that's really important. And I think the one aspect also is it makes you feel really grateful because we take sometimes for granted how many opportunities we have as being a woman, as being a young woman, being safe in the US, living in New York, living in Philly. You don't feel like that everywhere else in the world. So I think that's a really good opportunity to say, I'm really grateful for what I have and also kind of humbles you. So I think everyone should go explore, even if it's a trip to Mexico, trip to Europe, and even if you want to be really wild, go over to Asia or even my bucket list is South America, or South Africa. So that will be next, like the next trips. But that's one thing I've taken away
Yeah,
personally.
no, and I do agree that you're seeing we take things for granted, especially as women. Although then there's the other like, and I think again, if to your point, if you didn't go to these other countries where you see women are really just going through atrocious
Right.
things, But then we can also, which becomes the subject of many of my topics, and I could even ask you in terms of pharma, and it tends to be more male dominated, and like so there are all levels of it. And so for me, I always say people, it's about there's all different levels, and it doesn't discount any of them, but maybe it takes a step back when you do see, okay, it's almost take advantage of what we have.
Exactly.
We still have to work more to get equal pay or equal positions or positions in leadership, but maybe you at least have your foot in the door and you the opportunity to, I don't know, try to do, to strive to do it.
Yeah, and I recently met this young student. I was doing a volunteer event. Um, and basically she was from a different country, didn't have the opportunities that she has here. And after she came up to me and was like, "Thank you for sharing your story because I've never been in a situation where there's a woman who has a job in a corporation, let alone, doesn't have restrictions." And that's very inspiring. And you're like, wow, like if you could just make that impact on one person as a student, imagine what else you can learn when you're going out there to different part of the country or world where you could learn so much. So I say everyone should book a ticket to their next destination.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely want to travel more. I've started more so for a lot of the time career wise, and I lived cross country, so whenever I could travel, I would go to Boston to visit my family. You know what I mean? So it definitely it limited my travel, but now I've been doing it much more so as an adult, and I highly recommend it.
I could give you lots of recommendations, Lisa, but I think that's a different episode.
Yes, we'll have a travel episode. So, okay, last one. Follow your passion. Get excited about volunteering in a lab or working for a company that aligns with your ethics, morals, and passion. So, I think for advice there that you're sort of saying, don't necessarily go with the biggest company or the company that seems to be this one you should be at, but also make sure that it aligns with your passions. The way I want to turn it on you is, what are you passionate about?
Yeah, so I actually from a very young age, that's why I wanted to be a physician, was I'm very passionate about like giving back and like taking care of others and making a difference, local community and globally. So for me, I was like, how can I be able to give back for people who have helped me along the way when I had to ask questions when I was navigating either my career, navigating schools, what to do. So my passion is in STEM. So which stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, sometimes people even say STEAM with the A in arts in it, but it's up to everyone's different preference. And for me, since I was the first one in the science field for my family, I said there's probably other people that are like me who are kind of maybe a little lost, need a little advice, maybe are scared to ask. So for me, I've always said, how can I give back to the community? So for me, one of my friends, her mom started a nonprofit called Career Day Inc., which basically takes people from different careers, brings them to high school classes, high schools or across the Long Island, New York area, and also middle schools. And basically, kids can attend like a full day of going to different sessions or classes where there's a different person in there that talks about their job. So for me, I've gone back and I said, a kid's not going to want to listen to me talking about, I do this financial, I do this marketing strategy. So I've done a little bit of this kind of like, what are your top key takeaways, which is what I used for the post after I did the Drexel lecture. And it actually, you never know who's listening. So I think for one thing is giving back to the local community about how to navigate and figure out their own self. And the other is how do you provide young students who may come from underserved or underprivileged backgrounds with an opportunity. So through my company, I was able to start a STEM scholarship program in the North Jersey and Drexel, Philadelphia area, where kids could get a scholarship from a company like Bristol Myers Squibb or any other big company, and it gets that on their resume and it gets them in the door. So once again, it goes about opportunity, and some people just or kids don't have that given their circumstances with their family or where they are. So for me, it's all about giving back and paving it to the next generation, and I love doing it. It kind of makes you feel more young too when you're talking to the younger kids.
Yeah, no, I love that. And also just when you're talking STEM with women, I mean, I know that you're not just focusing with women, but having them see you, just like the woman who came up to you and someone in your position, a woman in a leadership position. And I'm sure seeing, because there's at least what I've been reading about and you hear about so much that there's not enough women going into STEM. And part of it may be because one, their upbringing, boys are science, girls are English and whatever.
Mhm.
And then also they don't, or they come from an area that they don't have those opportunities, or they come from a situation like that. So to bring that to them, like, so let's go out of that, because not everyone's going to be able to become part of that scholarship, but that girl just growing up, and maybe she has an inclination to science like you did. I
Yeah.
did, but like you, and but she's not being guided in that way. Like, what do you say to that person? And obviously, maybe you can't talk to an 8-year-old, but even the high school kid or the girl or the college student trying to figure out, and still, there's not necessarily that avenue to get into these kind of positions.
I think I've spoken to some students that are as young as middle school, and they're extremely a lot more curious and they're not jaded. So they're really willing to ask a lot of questions. So in that kind of situation where I have said to these young students, I give my email to about 100 students. I said, call, to email me, like literally email me. Sometimes not even one student does it. And that's where kind of, if you're struggling, I think it's okay to ask for help. It goes back to that's how I've always been curious. If I wouldn't have gotten here if I didn't ask a million questions. My friends still make fun of me. I ask a lot of questions. Otherwise, you're not going to know. So I would say, like, it's really nice when someone who's younger says, how did you do it? I go, if you give me a few minutes, I'm happy to chat with you about it. And some students have done it, and some even early women in their early career will do it. My sister's also in the pharmaceutical industry, and she sends her friends my way all the time, which is great. And I joke to my sister, she has an in-house consultant because I'm always talking to her about how to guide her career. But it just goes back to being vulnerable and being okay with being uncomfortable. So you get to that area where you can be comfortable.
Yeah, and just not be pigeonholed.
Exactly.
I would say to a young woman, just if this is where your heart is and this is where you're good at or you feel you're good at. But I do agree that having someone to ask and seeing someone who looks like them, that is doing it, all of that makes such a difference.
Yes, like you see in every day, there are sometimes I still walk in rooms where I'm like, no one looks like me. Or if I'm in certain parts of the US with my sales team, I'm walking in where absolutely no one looks like me. Or even, being a New Yorker, let alone kind of besides the Indian background is different. So I
Mhm.
think it just goes back to you have to have that confidence to just walk in, ask the question, and just be authentic.
Yep, no, I totally agree. Okay, so speaking of being authentic, let's find out something about you that no one really knows, or us, maybe your close friends do, but is there a talent or maybe just something about you that it could even be just inconsequential, but something that you do and no one knows about, or most of us don't know about?
I would say I really like reading, and that's why I'm a big Harry Potter fan.
Oh,
So
really?
in terms of talents, I'm not very musical, but I would say I am actually a big reader, even though for someone being pretty extroverted, I do like to kind of have introverted tendencies. And I actually am a big Harry Potter fan. No one would really know that unless you like walk into my house. There's little nods to it, but Harry Potter and the wizardly world is truly magical. It lets you take go away. I've gone to Harry Potter World many times. My one of my birthday themes was it. My family surprised me with like a Harry Potter Quidditch cake for anyone who knows that is. But so that's where I like to geek out.
That's awesome. Do you have a little wand or
I
hat or?
do. I have a wand, and a few years ago, my mom went with my sister and I to Harry Potter World, and she's like, "Wow, my grown daughters are really loving this theme park." I said, "Why not? Everyone's a kid when you're in Harry Potter World."
That's awesome. All right. So I do know, as I say, I do my snooping. And once again on LinkedIn, I there's the Boston accent coming out. It always comes out with words like people, like the R's never come out for me.
It's
I mean,
okay.
always good with the R's. It's the saw or like things like that. Anyway, I noticed one of when in your about page, you wrote different things, but one of the things you did write is you are a champion of inclusion and diversity in the workplace. So I want to know, what do you see as the role of marketers in culture when it comes to marketing? Is there an obligation there? Is there a responsibility to sort of portray things that are more inclusive? And how far does that go in your mind?
Yeah, I think there's several aspects to it. One, as a marketer, we have to make sure that the feedback we get from our customers is it takes into consideration male feedback and female feedback, because sometimes the way a woman may treat a patient is different than a male may treat a patient. So that's one thing. Another thing when it comes to inclusion is also age. What I've seen in the being in the rheumatology community, it's fascinating how the upcoming rheumatologists, so these are physicians who treat autoimmune disorders like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis. A lot of them are women. And you have to be able to approach and speak to a woman physician like you would, very a little differently than or someone younger in their career versus someone who's maybe been an older male that's been practicing for 30 plus years. So I think one, as a marketer, we really have to be in touch with what's going on in the community, but then also what's going on with the physicians that are either entering or leaving the workplace. So in the pharmaceutical industry, that's important. Our customers are our physicians, but then also take into the patients into consideration. Once again, patients can be diverse, age, background, where they live. Sometimes we don't have access to patients who live in maybe a community home versus someone who might have access to getting to a doctor's appointment because of their grandkids or because of their kids. So I think we need to be really specific. And if you're marketing a certain drug or a certain device, who is your audience? Who is your customer? And really capture the customer experience that links it all the way to the patient experience. Because if you don't take those factors into consideration, you're going to be marketing to a percentage of 5, and then you're not going to be able to then make any efforts or change any outcomes.
Yep. So you really have to keep everyone in mind for,
Exactly.
especially, I mean, in anything, in any brand, but especially in pharma, I would,
Mhm.
and health. Okay, what's your guilty pleasure?
So I love a good brownie, but recently I found out I have a dairy allergy. So there goes all my guilty pleasure for all the desserts. But if I could find a really good vegan brownie that actually doesn't taste like chalk, I would say, or make it myself, then that's my guilty pleasure, anything that's sweet.
You know what? I think I have to look. There's a woman I think I interviewed for, and if I'm remembering the brand, or the food, it's all cupcakes and things, and I think there are vegan. I'll send you the link. It's supposedly they're amazing. This, like whatever, they're like cupcakes because she had cancer, and the name of the brand is totally not coming to me. But she had cancer, and then she survived, and she realized she wanted. You need pleasure in life. You can't
Yeah.
give pleasure. There's too much, but how can you do this? And so she came up with this. So I'll find out and I'll send it.
Yes. Please
Yes.
send it to me. Yeah. I mean, I would say food in general,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's hard having a food allergy. Like you're like, wait, I just have to eat very clean, but which is good, but guilty pleasure would be something sweet.
no, you need to at least have that brownie once in a while, or for me, chocolate chip cookie. So okay, I will find that out. All right. So I want to ask you also, I think this be my final question. Again, with my snooping, I saw that you posted on LinkedIn, which I love this, that you do so many events for children, for kids, not children. They're high school. And there was one that you did 5 years ago for New City Kids, and
Oh
that was in
yeah.
New Jersey. And you were so impressed by them because of all the challenges they were not only willing, they shared and talked about, and they were overcoming them. And so you were obviously, as you said, it just really moved you to listen to their stories. Well, I want to ask, is there a challenge you went through? And I know, like, I mean, obviously, when you talked about your parents, and that was their challenge, but something that you maybe came across younger age or even in adulthood, but a challenge that you were a little bit like, I'm not going to get through this, and then you did, you persevered, and talk about that.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of two parts. One was like, trying to even like navigate college or grad school was really hard. If you don't have anyone that goes before you or around you, if you've taken a different path, then that's really hard to navigate. So for me, like I didn't know how to fill out college applications. I didn't know what questions to ask. I like showed up. I was like, Dad, Mom, let's go check out this college, and kind of did a lot of myself. And at times you were like, why didn't I get into this top school? Why, everyone wanted to go to all the Ivies, right? And I was like, well, how did my friends all get into them? Either they had legacy or their parents just knew what to do. Nowadays, I think everyone's a lot more savvy of putting your kids in extracurricular activities, doing community service. I just didn't have that. So I think for me, and then I had that similar challenges after I didn't get into med school. I was like, what do I do next? That's when I also then asked a few friends and I said, they're like, why don't you try business school? I said, oh, can I do it? So then I ended up getting my MBA from Cornell because I was going around asking people how to do that. So I think that one big challenge of how do you navigate a new system took a really long time for me to understand, but that's our everyday life. Life would be too easy if you didn't have any complexities to it. So I think that was a big challenge I overcame. And now what I'm more experiencing is a little bit of ageism
Mhm.
where I've always been also the youngest in the room, whether if it was in grad school, whether it is when I was getting my MBA, whether even if it was some of the jobs I've been in or have been in now. So I think on either side, if you're too young or you're too old, that's really hard. How do you navigate that? And I know there's another speaker that you interviewed who talked about that too. It's kind of like being confident now. Now you embrace being the youngest and you just joke and say, do you want my skincare? I'm happy to give it to you. So I think in
Yep.
a way that's like a new challenge I've navigated. It's taken me a while to accept being the younger one in the room, but it also makes me proud that I've come so far and I still have so much to go.
Yeah. Well, and also I think as you sort of said, the confidence, like, you're going to prove you don't have to, it's not about arguing, I'm good. It's about just talking and being yourself and prove you see that they'll see that you're good and that you know what you're talking about, whether you're 20 or 60. You know what I mean? So I think that it's just about, but what leads it all is that confidence to do that and not be impacted by that kind of ageism.
Yeah. It takes a while because you have to go in and be like, okay, there's been time where people have grandkids my age and you're like, how do I make sure I'm still a leader? How do I still have commonalities with people? And you're kind of just peeling back the onion, asking questions, being uncomfortable, kind of embracing it too, being okay, like, I always joke and say I love TikTok and everyone thinks I'm a Gen Zer. Totally fine. You could think whatever you like, but it kind of brings also a little bit of that comedic relief and being a little bit more relaxed in a work situation that might be a little stressful. So yeah, so it's about embracing and having a little bit of confidence and I'll give people my beauty regimens if they like.
Well, on that note, I can see everyone will be asking for that, but no, that I think that's great. But I do think the key word was being authentic, is like what you said, and just be yourself, and then it will. I mean, you're not going to bring around everyone,
No.
but the ones that matter ultimately, you will. So.
Yes. And it's about just being kind too.
Yes, no, I completely agree. Well, Deepika, this was awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you and taking the time and also, like I said, getting to know this side of you even more so than we did in Bonita Springs. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for having me. This was really nice. And I hope at the end of the day, we're just able to share our journeys and just be able to connect with other women like myself, like yourself. So thank you for the opportunity.
No, I totally appreciate it. And I want to thank you for watching. And as I say always, if you have a woman that you'd like, a successful woman marketer like Deepika, who you'd love to hear their story, just let me know and I will do my best to get her. So I appreciate you watching. And again, thanks, Deepika.
Thank you, Lisa.